Hey, so Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach, Kutyantiv, Happy Shavuot, Chag Bikurim Sameach, Happy Festival of the First Fruits. You'll be learning about that if you're not already familiar. And welcome to our all-night Shavuot Torah study. Well, not all night, maybe an hour, 15 minutes. but it's in honor of this all-night Torah study, and we'll be learning about why that is a thing later on. So I like to begin usually with a little melody or nigun. And this is one we often do with, we do some of it when we're taking the Torah around. Since it is the holiday of the giving of the Torah, I thought I could sing it. And you can sing along while you're on mute, okay? Okay. So, the children of Israel and the Torah, the Holy One of blessing, are one. The children of Israel and the Torah, the Holy One of blessing, are one. You know this part. Torah, ora, Torah, ora, hallelujah. Ora, ora, Torah, ora, hallelujah, hallelujah. Torah, ora, Torah, ora, hallelujah. Torah, ora, Torah, ora, hallelujah. Yisroel ve'oraita v'kucha barichu chadhu. Yisroel ve'oraita v'kucha barichu chadhu. Yai Torah ora, Torah ora, hallelujah. Torah ora, Torah ora, hallelujah. So now, if anyone have their candles, I have mine real candles downstairs, but if you're lighting your candles, maybe you'd like to light them now if you haven't already done that, and we can see your candles. I have my actual candles downstairs, and so I just have my little, LED candles up here, and we can say the blessing for the candles. And we'll say Lahadlik Ner Shel Yom Tov for festival and a shehechianu. So whoever's lighting them. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'adlik ner shel yom tov. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Amen. We also could say Kiddush. I thought I might do the Kiddush at the end of the program, if that sounds okay. I like the way Lisa's got her candles set up. It's very good production values. I got a really good view of them, and I can see Fran's candles, and I'm sure there's others that are a little off the screen. Oh, yeah, there's Patricia's got some. Very nice. Very nice. So, so this evening, let's show you what we've got. We've got a very special Torah learning planned, and I'm so glad that you're here to do this with us. Hold on. It's about the history and mystery of Shavuot. And this is our Torah study. I'm going to lead it, but my part's going to be the end. So first we're going to have George Beckerman and Larry Stollar, and we're going to cover different parts of Shavuot. But first we'll say a blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. You've made us holy with your mitzvot and bid us to engage with words of Torah. So tonight, I thought that looked a little like a cheesecake with fruit. Tonight, I think most of the pictures are, except maybe one or two are just stock photos tonight. But we'll first be looking at the Ten Commandments. which of course are in the news right now. In my home state of Texas, they want to have them up in every classroom. So I think George could enlighten us about the Ten Commandments. Um, and and then we'll hear about the history of Shavuot from Larry. So George Beckerman and Larry Stollar. And then I'll bring up the rear with the customs of Shavuot, some of the minhagim that make Shavuot a fun and enjoyable festival. So we're going to start with the Ten Commandments because this is the holiday of the giving of the Torah, the giving of the Ten Commandments. But before we do that, George, do you want to start out by introducing it before we bring the slides up?
Introduce the subject or myself?
Yeah, I mean, you tell me what to do and I'll do whatever you want.
Okay. So why don't you bring the slide up, Rabbi?
Okay. We're each going to do about 20 minutes and then allow another 15 minutes of discussion. So, or we can go all night, whichever you guys want. All right.
Mine can be very short.
Okay.
So I chose to speak on the Ten Commandments tonight because I've been fascinated about the evolution of the language over time through different cultures into and out of different faiths. And I started to go down that path, and then I changed my mind. So we're going to deal with the Ten Commandments, but not per se, a different aspect of Shavuot. But let me start off with this. You see the various sort of thumbnail titles or first sentences of each of the 10 Ten Commandments. And you see a little bit of difference across the various denominations in the order of events, the order of the commandments, and in some of the language. A little later on, I want to focus on commandment number 4. You shall remember the Shabbat, the Sabbath, and keep it holy.
Now,
right.
May I jump in with one thing? I noticed, one thing is I think they're in the same order, but it's, but the way they're divided up is different. The way they count up to 10 is different, right? But my question is, what you have their 10 utterances to 10 commandments. Do you want to tell us why you have 10 utterances?
Well, because you introduced me to that term, the 10 utterances, as the original term, 10 utterances or 10 words. And then through the various versioning of the original material into Greek first, and then into Latin, and then so forth and so on, the framing changed to commandments, and several of these commandments, of course, are you shall. And those are there are more you shalls than the others. So it seems that somehow in the evolution of these ideas, it became simpler to use 10 commandments. And I do think that graphic is from Sefaria, so I've been using that as a resource.
Okay.
And by the way, I stand to be corrected or informed or challenged on any of the things I say here. This is brand new for me. So on the left here is a tablet of what is now thought to be the first known engraving of the 10 Commandments. And just as luck would have it for us, on December 18th last year, that was auctioned off for $5 million. And it was purchased by an anonymous purchaser intending to give it, I don't know where it is, by the way, probably in New York. The auction was at Sotheby's, but it's going to Israel. This buyer bought it as a way to make sure it gets to Israel. So that tablet, let me just open this up here on my computer. That tablet is 115 pounds. It's not something that Moses would have been able to keep in his hands walking down the mountain. It's 2 feet high, and it's got 20 lines of text in Paleo Hebrew script. It was probably written somewhere between 300 CE and 640, around the time that the Roman Empire was breaking apart into 2 pieces, Byzantine and Roman. And what's interesting here, in addition to everything I might have said, is that 9 of the commandments are essentially from the book of Exodus, but the 10th commandment here is a little bit different. It's been swapped out, it says in this article I'm reading, the 10th commandment being, do not take the name of the Lord in vain. Instead, this tablet is an instruction to worship on Mount Gerizim, Gerizim. Gerizim, a holy site specific to Samaritans, located near the Palestinian city of Nablus. The Dead Sea Scrolls 10 commandments were written somewhere between 200 BCE and the fall of the Second Temple. So that puts this in context of 400 years, 500 years apart. So we're dealing with some ancient material here, which has clearly been through a lot. This was thought to be a welcoming plaque on a synagogue. Later on, it was used as part of the flooring on a church, which is said to explain why some of it has been rubbed down, not just for age. So when I confronted all of this and trying to figure out how I was going to navigate through a review, a discussion, my perception of the 10 commandments, I decided to focus on number 4. And the reason that I did that is because Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote a book called The Sabbath, and we discussed in Rabbi's seminar Heschel last week or the week before. And so I thought I would delve into number 4, and to do it in the Exodus version and also in the Deuteronomy version. I'm sorry I don't have the slide for Deuteronomy, but we'll figure that out. So here's the 4th utterance, the 4th commandment from the book of Exodus. And to take a cue from Rabbi Julie's approach, would anybody like to read this? I can't see. Let me see. Okay.
If someone wants to read it, just jump in. Who would like to read?
I'm happy to read it. It's Fern.
Oh, go for it.
You, Fern.
Okay, I'm on my phone. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath unto the Lord thou God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thou manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor the cattle, nor the stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all that in them is, and rested on the 7th day. This is a long sentence. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Thank you. I think I found that in a 1954 volume of the Pentateuch and a Haftorah. And I chose it because that's the year I turned 13. But there are many other versions, of course, from different publishers and through different translations. So I reflected on this, and I started to go through some of the materials I have by Heschel, not only the Sabbath, but a few of his books and a couple of biographies of Heschel. And so we usually see him marching with Martin Luther King, and looks like a prophet walking down the avenue in a civil rights march. He's clearly younger here. He seems to prefer the Deuteronomy version of the fourth commandment. And if you could just go back for a second, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 lines up from the bottom. This is where I should have had another slide. 5 lines up from the bottom, the line begins, thy gates. And then I'm going to read, so there's actually 4 stanzas here. I'm going to read the 4th stanza, which begins 4 in 6 days. I'm going to read that in the Deuteronomy version. And then we're going to see a really significant difference. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God brought thee out thence by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. So, comparing the 4th stanza in this Exodus version with the one I just read in Deuteronomy, Heschel points out, as does Buber and several others, that the Exodus version is really a story of creation, to remember the day. Remember the day, and then think about it in the context of the creation. From the Deuteronomy version, as you'll see in the first line, which you don't see yet, I'm going to read it now. Not remember the day, the Sabbath day, but observe the Sabbath day. So the remembering the Sabbath day is sort of a mental, intellectual, internal, ritualistic exercise. But observing the day is what Heschel's daughter Susanna says, imitating God. And it's imitating the actions of God from the Exodus story, not from the creation story, the creation of the universe, the creation of heaven and earth. So we have a creation version and a history version, a Genesis version and an Exodus version. And I will acknowledge this is something I did not know anything about before. And so as I was struggling to figure out how to deal with the 10 Commandments, I thought I would dwell on this a little bit for our conversation here this evening. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I decided to pick up a couple of excerpts from 2 works by Heschel. The first one is from the Sabbath, 1951 edition. I think that's the first edition. And this is the very last, this is constructed from the very last 2 paragraphs in the book. there's an epilogue that follows this, but these are sort of the wrapping up words. And of course, Heschel was writing about the Sabbath as time, and spirituality as time, as opposed to space, in which he would characterize it as a place where cathedrals or synagogues could be built, helping to define the space. But time is what he invites us, what Heschel invites us to consider. And he goes on in this first section here to compare the fourth commandment and the 10th commandment, which of course doesn't appear on that stone that we looked at earlier. Do not covet anything belonging to thy neighbor. I have given thee something that belongs to me. What is that something? A day, the Sabbath. Judaism seeks to displace the coveting of things in space for coveting the things in time, teaching man to covet the 7 days, all days of the week, the seventh day, all days of the week. It is as if the command, do not covet things in space, were correlated with the unspoken word, do covet things of time. And it took me a while to reflect on that, which I did when I read it first a long time ago. I'm trying to appreciate the things of time, trying to appreciate how to experience the kind of cosmic time, the spiritual time that Heschel is talking about here. And I've decided I'm going to try and do that over the next couple of weeks in various meditation sessions and the like. And then in God in Search of Man, one of his major works, just a year or two after I was bar mitzvah, he writes, at Sinai, we have learned, I need to bring it up. Hang on 1 second, please. At Sinai, we have learned that spiritual values are not only aspirations in us, but a response to the transcendent appeal addressed to us. Revelation is a moment in which God succeeded in reaching man, an event to God and an event to man. And this is what drew me the most to sort of stick with this for tonight. The notion of revelation. And what Heschel is referring to here is the descending of God down to Mount Sinai, enveloping Mount Sinai, being as close to the people, as close to other men as possible. God in search of man. And in acknowledging or formulating and acknowledging the covenant, which the Israelites then adopted well into the future to 2025, I guess, and hopefully beyond that. So net, Shavuos, for me, transforms from an observance of the giving of the law, giving of the Torah, to one of the revelation of God connecting with man in as physical, transcendent, spiritual way as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, George. That's really a beautiful thought. I think because a lot of Jewish thinkers have asked, what is there content to Revelation? How much was revealed, right? Was it law, or it's interesting, right, that the Jewish tradition uses the word dibrot, utterances, speeches, rather than commandments, because for one thing, is the first one even a commandment? I'm the Lord your God. And so was it an experience? Was it an encounter? Was it just a silent encounter, what you feel commanded? I thought all of those were very beautiful. And does anyone have questions for George from the things that he's been studying? George, do you have something you want people to reflect on from what you've taught about tonight?
Well, yeah, just reflect on the difference between observe and remember. Reflect on the difference between giving of the Torah and encountering. This is about God encountering man. So these two visions or versions, the remembering and the observing, actually are reconciled in something that we are all quite familiar with. It's Lecha Dodi, the first verse of Lecha Dodi. Keep and remember a single command, the only God caused us to hear. A single command, not two different ones. The eternal one, God's name is one, glory and praise are God's. Keep and remember, those are the two terms that are reconciled and associated with the Deuteronomy version and with the Exodus version. And I'll just say one more thing quickly. Next Sunday is the Christian Pentecost Day. It is the day of revelation. And there, the revelation in those faiths, those denominations, the revelation is the descending of the Holy Spirit, the third element of the Trinity, which none of our Christian clergy around here acknowledge they can really be confident about explaining it to their congregation. I see Hannah smiling there. She knows Jeff Ross always mentions that. But what's interesting there, they're just tracking how these things work through time and cultures, is that the biblical description in the Torah has I'm going to call it stormy weather as God is descending. That same stormy weather appears in the New Testament with the descent of the Holy Spirit.
And of course, that was an event that took place on Shavuot that has been renamed Pentecost, which just means like the 50th day. It was Shavuot, and it is their idea of revelation, so it fits right in. So, and I just had a couple, just maybe to clarify for, like the Deuteronomy version, of course, is Moses retelling the Ten Commandments. And sure, you studied that, but I'm not sure if everybody got that. And so there's two different words, to keep and to remember. And to remember was not only like cognitively thinking about it, but it's like the positive commandments, the Kiddush and all the rituals of Shabbat. And then, the guarding, the keeping is like all the things you're not supposed to do on Shabbat. And it's wonderful that we kind of do those in stereo and we do Lecha Dodi. So I'm glad it took you on this journey, George, of discovery. And I hope will make us think more deeply about the individual commandments that we receive. And maybe they're not just a commandment, but they're a way for us to connect, an utterance that brings us closer. So thank you very much, George.
Thank you.
And we're going to turn it over now to Larry, who's going to talk about the history of Shavuot. And you can tell me whenever you want me to show
Yeah,
slides.
first slide is fine. I think it's just an intro.
Okay, yeah, I put a picture on. So
Then you can go to, okay, you can go to the second slide.
all right, just a moment, just a second. Okay.
Sure.
All right, I gotta be here and I gotta show. Well, I put a picture of the temple on it, so
Sure.
it would be.
Let's see your artwork.
Oh no, it's not my it's just one that I found on.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
But for some reason, okay, just a moment. I'm not sure. All right, now I can start from here. All right, here we go.
Oops.
So the history of Shavuot. There you go.
And let's start at the beginning. With Shavuot, of course, is the festival of weeks. And George's comments give us a good segue, because George mentioned one of the names of Shavuot, or it involves Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah, referring to events at Sinai. As you can see on the slide, though that actually does not appear in the biblical commandments for Shavuot. And there's just the verses are there. Exodus 23, the three regalim. Regalim means festivals, and they're based on the Hebrew word for foot. Literally the three pilgrimages which were made on foot. Before me each year, and the holiday of bringing in your first fruits. Rabbi mentioned Chag HaBikurim, the holiday of the first fruits. These were ripe, the first fruits, by 7 weeks after Passover. And it's 3 times each year. Each of your males shall be seen by the master Hashem, and the first fruits of the land you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. In Leviticus, we see the next verse, until the day after the 7th week, this is the counting of the Omer, and you shall offer a new meal offering to Hashem. The new meal is because, well, barley started growing around was harvestable around the time of Passover. Wheat was not, and wheat and the fruit was 7 weeks later. And the final note there is that it's not in the Tanakh, Zman Matan Toratenu. Various rabbis later on found hints and ideas about why they might be connected, but it is interesting in the lack of an explicit timing when the Tanakh the Torah is very specific about when other holidays are celebrated. Rabbi Evan Hoffman, the leader of Congregation Anshe Shalom in New Rochelle, New York, tells an interesting story about this, interpreting why this is missing. And he cites a passage from the prophet Ezekiel, who was living in Babylon during the Babylonian exile, 6th century, I believe. And Ezekiel lists holidays. And Ezekiel's list of holidays includes Pesach, it includes Sukkot. It does not mention Shavuot in his calendar of festivals. And Rabbi Hoffman suggests that Shavuot has a little bit of a problem. It has one central mitzvah, commandment, which is to bring the first fruits and appear at the temple. And in the aftermath of the fall of the temple in 1st century CE, Shavuot in many ways lost its purchase, its foothold, its reason for those in the diaspora. And so he proposes, as have others, that the reason it became associated in the rabbinical period in the first few hundred years CE is that it needed a backstory. Because once exile began and many Jews were living in Babylon and later elsewhere, a purely agricultural holiday based on seasons in Israel would have little resonance. And that contrasts with the mitzvot of Pesach and Sukkot, which are portable. On Pesach, we are commanded the Pesach sacrifice, which we can offer symbolically, and we're commanded to eat unleavened bread, which you can do wherever you are. On Sukkot, we're commanded to dwell in booths. And Shavuot did not have this. And I find that a pretty compelling explanation of why later the focus became Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. Okay, next slide. And this is there is one clue to how this particular pilgrimage festival was celebrated in ancient Israel during the times of the first and later second temple. The most important aspect was the offering of the first fruits. And Jews would come from, this is from the Mishnah, the oldest part of the Talmud, the compilation of the oral law from the 1st century CE. And there's a Mishnah Bikurim, first fruits. This is in a section that Bilka the Talmud that deals with all of the questions surrounding the implementation of agricultural life in particular in the land of Israel. So Jews would come during the time of the temple from all the villages of Israel and bring baskets filled with the first fruits. And the first fruits were mature and placed in a basket. And in each town and city of Israel, a caravan of several families was organized to travel together. And aside from the fruits, they brought pigeons as well as a bull. And the bull, as you can see in the picture, was decorated. And at dawn, the Kohanim accompanied the caravan into the city. The priests would accompany the caravan into the city of Jerusalem with songs and musical instruments, sometimes translated as flutes. And once in the temple, each individual would present their baskets before the priest, and while holding the basket on their shoulder, they'd recite the following statement. Today I come to declare my gratitude before Hashem. I have come to the land that he gave us, just as he promised to our ancestors. And the second part of that ceremony was the individual would recite something we have in our Haggadah. My ancestor was a wandering Aramean, and that's from the Passover Haggadah. So you can see the picture with everyone colorfully dressed and the decorated bull. And next one. And here we get into some aspects of Shavuot from the second temple period. Partly just due to fortuitous timing, but partly because its date was not specified exactly. It turned into something that two major factions, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, two major Jewish factions in the period of the Second Temple, would battle over. You may have heard of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. I've learned it was important when you reach these groups, research these groups, that you stick to the Jewish sources, because both of them play an active role in the Christian Gospels. And that role is not historically reliable, but it suits an element of the story where they contrast these supposed, particularly the Pharisees, get very bad press in the Christian Bible. But the first dispute was over the date, and it had to do with the technicality of when you started counting the Omer, the 7 weeks. and the Pharisees, who are the ancestors of Rabbinic Judaism, the Judaism that survived the fall of the temple. And their emphasis was on piety. It was on individual obeying and following of the commandments. And so they understood the reference to counting from the Shabbat of Pesach as a reference to the day of Passover, the second day of Passover itself, which is it is a festival. It is a Shabbat on which you don't work and observe the other commandments for Shabbat. The Tzaddukim, the Sadducees, here it mentions one of their factions, Boethusians. The Sadducees were the priests, and over the centuries of the time of the Second Temple, they developed into a powerful community, very wealthy, that emphasized ritual practice in the temple. They were also theologically very different than the rabbis and traditional Jewish belief. They did, for example, not believe in resurrection. They also were heavily involved in the process of Hellenization, and many of them became quite well off, almost Epicurean are some of the descriptions of them. In any case, they understood the commandment literally, which means you don't start counting on the first 2 days of Pesach. You waited until Shabbat actually, the seventh day actually came. Now, this may seem like a technicality, but the disputes between the Pharisees and the Sadducees were very deeply felt, and they had a good degree of political import, because one side would call in the local governor or the Roman authority, King Herod, to try and, in effect, support their side. And Sukkot is also connected with one of the final
Shavuot, do you mean Shavuot?
Shavuot, excuse me, thank you. Shavuot is also connected with one of the major interventions of the Roman army in Judea. Now, the Roman army, finally, we date the final overthrow of the Jewish Commonwealth to the year 70. But since 63, Judea was already a client state ruled by a king installed by the Roman Senate. So it was a Roman satrap or province. King Herod, who was half Jewish, half Nabatean, I believe, occupied the throne between 37 BCE and 4 CE. Herod was not a popular guy. His reign was marked by political scheming, heavy taxation, and ruthless persecution of opposition. He dies in 4 CE, and Archelaus, his son, was beset with all the popular grievances against his father. And so he went to Rome to try to get his inheritance validated. While he was there, Judea erupted in unrest, which peaked on Shavuot. Now, this was not the first time unrest was associated with Shavuot. Because they were gatherings, if the crowds were unhappy, they were often unruly. And there were recorded episodes of, on Sukkot, the crowds throwing etrogim, the citrus, at the priests. So, and at representatives of authority. So, while Archelaus was in Rome, a military conflict broke out, and the Jews actually mounting a successful attack from the walls of the temple itself, which interestingly had been built by Herod, the ones we see now. They gained the upper hand, but the Roman military based in the city suppress the rebellion. Following this episode, Judea, it melted into chaos. There were violent uprisings everywhere. Perhaps people perceived that with Archelaus gone, that the Romans wouldn't be successful, quite as successful. There was a vacuum that maybe these uprisings could be successful. Rome expected the governor of the nearest province to intervene. In this case, Syria. There was a general governor named Publius Quintilius Verus, known as Verus. He went south with a large army out of Antioch and suppressed the uprising. This was in the year 4. And for the next 66 years, the Judea was a semi-independent but fully controlled Roman province. And finally, it lost what semblance of independence it had in the year 70. So Shavuot later, there's a significant literature later on that the various stages of first the Mishnah, then the Gemara, then the other commentators added a fair amount of commentary on Shavuot, and largely in the context of developing this notion of Zman Matan Toratenu, when you couldn't bring your first fruits to the temple. But Sukkot over the centuries, Shavuot, I don't know what's going on with that, but Shavuot over the centuries gained a wide variety of other customs of minhagim, and that will be the subject of Rabbi Julie's presentation.
Wow. So we've come very far. We've come the Ten Commandments at Sinai, the holiday, the pilgrimage festivals, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the internecine politics, and then bringing the Romans. This holiday has a lot going on, and it looks like Susan Towers has a question here.
Oh, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, okay. I'm listening to all this, and I'm one of the people who went to Israel and climbed up to Masada on sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, from what you're talking about, Masada, that whole story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but didn't that happen, I think, 73 or 76?
Right. It's during this period, there was a great deal of factional fighting and factionalizing within Judea. And one of those factions, one large, significant faction took off to the desert. And those were the Essenes and the Boethusians and other communities that, in effect, tried to retreat from politics. But another sect chose hardline resistance. Even though the army had been defeated, the Judean army had been defeated and the country was occupied by Rome, a group went to Masada after the conquest, at some point after the conquest in the year 70, and holed up at this fortress in the sky. And if you've seen it, you saw how well provided it was for defense, for water, and for storing food. And they held out a staunch defense until the Roman general Titus, or don't quote me on that, did something rather famous in military history. He literally built a giant ramp up the side of the mountain. And you can see that ramp, as well as on the other side of Masada, you see the remnants, the outlines of the Roman camp. And so, yes, that's the story of the final resistance that is said to have ended in a suicide pact rather than capture. For many years, the Israeli army swore its new recruits in on Masada, but at some point they got away from that. for whatever reason.
Wonder why.
Yeah.
Well, it was, they
It's a
would say
little,
Masada will not fall again. Yeah, but it's maybe the message is right is not the best one to be
no,
given. In other words, a group of zealots, and maybe they wanted to tone down zealotry. But actually, that really made me think about something, because what we had George talking about the Ten Commandments, which was Mount Sinai, and now here we're talking about another famous mountain, Masada, right? Maybe how many people have climbed Masada or have taken the who climbed it themselves
on foot.
on foot? Who
Yeah.
went on a cable car?
One time.
And has anyone here climbed Mount Sinai?
Yes.
My daughter did, but I didn't. So that's, a very different kind of mountain, right? They're two different. I mean, I wouldn't say that Masada is associated with Shavuot, but it's a mountain. And one time we studied all these different mountains in Jewish tradition. So it's kind of a different peak experience, right? Based around Torah and based around national survival, I guess you could say. So anyway, that was really, I hope there was something new. Did anybody learn something new from any of that right now? I did, I didn't know about all the different emperors who got involved. I did know about the Sadducees and the Pharisees disagreeing. And obviously disagreeing around the calendar is a very important thing, because if you control time, like George was saying, time is more important than space. Really, if you could control the time that things happen, you have a lot of power, right? Okay, so let me ask you, now that's getting close to midnight. Just kidding, it's getting close to that was the idea, we'd stay up till midnight, but no. But now I'd like to look at kind of more the fun aspects of Shavuot, this holiday of revelation, this holiday of I think you really got everything in there, Larry, with the the bikurim, the first fruits, the wheat harvest. But what do you, first of all, just raise your hand if you did anything to observe Shavuot when you were growing up. So not too many people observed it at all growing up. Wow. Did you observe Passover growing up? Okay. Did you observe Sukkot? I mean, even at the temple, synagogue, or whatever. So I wonder, that's a very good segue, because some Shavuot, we said, it has got a little bit of a image problem compared to the other regalim, the other pilgrimage festivals, Sukkot and Passover. First of all, it's a lot shorter, obviously. It's only either 1 day or 2 days, depending on your observance. Okay, I want to again start this. Let's see. Hopefully this is going to work for me. So we have beautiful and delicious customs of Shavuot. This is, I didn't mean to put my name there that big, but it's a photo of 1 year. I think this was during the pandemic, because we were outside and we had all the symbols there with the flowers, the fruit bikurim, the cheesecake, the challahs, and the Torah. So I actually, before I put this up there though, don't read it yet. Don't read it yet. Yikes. I've lost my, oh gosh, no. Okay. Oh boy. Sorry, guys. I don't know. Technical difficulties. I don't know what you saw there, but you probably heard me going, ah! All right. Question. Why don't you put in the chat some of what your favorite Shavuot custom, minhag? Because since Shavuot, as we've already noted, doesn't have the and it doesn't have, as Larry quoted another rabbi saying, it had one commandment. Well, it has the wheat harvest and then bringing offerings at the temple, which isn't standing. So what do you do? So they came up with a lot of different explanations and customs. And let's see, no one's reading, or is somebody writing anything? Okay, eating dairy, blintzes. Yeah, blintzes. I'm into blintzes, but if someone else makes them for me. Blintzes. Okay, that's it. It's all about blintzes. No cheesecake. Maybe we could have like we had the Latka Homentashen debate. So maybe we could have the cheesecake blintzes debate. Honestly, my family had no customs for this holiday. How did we get dairy from barley, wheat, and rams? Yeah, let's look at that. All right. There's different theories about it. So we'll look at that in a moment. Well, one thing I heard, it was from Pardes from Jerusalem, that maybe because Shavuot usually comes outside the school year. So kids don't learn about it in Hebrew school, right? And it's kind of before summer camp starts. So they just kind of miss it, right? And if you're counting on your synagogue to do it with you, with your kids in Sunday school or Hebrew school, maybe you're going to miss it. Only people that are really observant are going to do it. And then you're going to say, well, what did I really remember about this holiday? I mean, you can't really miss the Passover Seder. You can't miss the eating matzah and all those things. And you can't really miss, if you do the sukkah and waving the lulav, those are things that will impress you. But since there weren't rituals like that, we came up with different customs. Okay, let's see. I hope this is going to work, guys. I think I'm just going to do a small screen because then I have less technical problems. Is that okay? Can you see it okay? Can you see it, even though it's a little bit small? All right. So some of the customs and practices of the day, I mean, are including our special readings. So we did hear about the 10 Commandments from George. So we read the 10 Commandments. We'll read them tomorrow at the synagogue. And we stand up to, emulate the fact that that we stood at Sinai and to feel like we're really standing at Sinai, hearing them again. And we're going to hear from the vision of Ezekiel and the vision of the chariot from Jeffrey, and as part of the Haftarah. And it's also traditional to read the book of Ruth. I don't think we're not going to read it in the synagogue tomorrow, but it's traditional to read it or study it at this time. And then we have this all-night learning. We'll hear about that in a moment. Decorating the synagogue with greenery and flowers, and special foods and confirmation. Did anyone here did anyone here get confirmed? I got it now. Wait, I gotta share. Oop. Did anyone here get confirmed? Well, even if you don't remember it, you probably had confirmation on Shavuot, because the Reform movement came up with Shavuot as a confirmation, as a good activity to have on Shavuot. It's like, something about affirming your belief in the Torah. So it seems to work out. Okay, well, let's look at some of the different customs and how I picked 3 because obviously we're doing a lot tonight. So the first one is seen to be the most popular one in our group. Let me see, which is eating dairy. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try showing it. So here's the thing with customs. There's a lot of standard answers. And if you look up online, you're going to see different common explanations. But the truth is, nobody knows exactly why you do those things. But some people have done studies to kind of look back and see when these customs actually started. I was listening to kind of funny report from Israel today about the custom of eating dairy foods, and they really attributed it to the dairy industry in Israel as promoting that we have to eat dairy foods on Shavuot. Well, I think it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but she was making a point that most Jews are lactose intolerant, and she talked about what I maybe Elsa would be able to explain this more to us, but from the medical point of view. But apparently we are more tend to be lactose intolerant, so bring your Lactaid tomorrow. But there are other reasons for more, different reasons were thought up later to kind of explain a custom that grew up mostly in Europe with Ashkenazic or Sephardic Jews over hundreds of years. So one of the things to do, one of the verses is from the Song of Songs, Shira Shirim, milk and honey, honey and milk, chalav udvash, or dvash chalav, are under your tongue. So the Torah is like as delicious and nourishing as milk and honey. So therefore we should eat sweet dairy things. And what could be better than our blintzes or cheesecake and whatever. Someone want to read the next one? Someone want to read? Anybody want to? Okay, excuse me, Fran. Unmute. Be sure you're unmuted. You got to unmute. We can't hear you.
Did you say Fern or Fran?
Fran.
After
Someone
receiving the
unmuted.
Torah, the Israelites did not yet know the laws of kosher slaughter, so they ate dairy.
Yeah, that's a very popular explanation. And again, it just really reeks of a very invented idea because for obvious reasons, but that's like a very typical explanation. Okay, go ahead.
The
Gematria.
numerical value of halal
Halav.
milk is 40, symbolizing the 40 days Moses spent on Sinai.
Okay, I mean, that's again getting creative, a little creative interpretation. That many reasons have been thought up. Continue then.
Dairy represents the nurturing, gentle qualities of Torah.
Again, unless you are lactose intolerant, in which case it doesn't feel very gentle and nurturing. And finally,
it's a time of year when fruits and dairy foods are abundant, and the reasons came afterwards.
And I think that's true, but I do like to be a bit romantic with things. So I like to say the milk and honey, or the honey and milk, and of the Holy Land, and of the nourishing, the nourishment that we get from Torah, which is both sweet and sustaining. And I think those are all great, ways to enjoy the holiday. And I've questioned, what are your specialties? Please let me know. Either write it in the chat, or you can just tell us, what do you especially like to make for Shavuot? Anybody? Or just write it down. Make, buy, defrost.
I would make cheesecake if asked.
Okay, if asked. Sarah, would you make me a cheesecake?
I am making pitless dates with some sharp cheese, soft
Ooh.
cheese.
That sounds delicious. That sounds very nutritious and delicious. And also, when the Bible spoke of honey, it probably meant date syrup, date honey. But when we talked about a land flowing with milk and honey, it probably talked about the terrain of the Holy Land, which was kind of rocky. And they're like, goats, good for herding goats, and people had their goat milk, and they had their date honey and so on. So it's a little different than we might think of from Trader Joe's, but it was milk and honey. So cheesecake team. So how many are team cheesecake? Okay. Team blintzes. And since I'm from San Antonio, I have to say we make cheese enchiladas because that's a great thing to have for Shavuot. All right. Ice cream's good. Anything dairy, but also those fruits that remind you of the first fruit offerings. Okay, I got 2 more customs for you. Now we'll get into one that's a little more food for the soul, and that is the custom of Tikkun Leil Shavuot, which is the all-night study of Torah. I wish I could say I took that picture, but I did not. I think it's just a stock photo. So I'm going to read this because it has it's got some different words thrown in Aramaic, but this is from Daniel Matt, Professor Daniel Matt, who is famed as the translator of the Zohar into English. It's called the Pritzker edition in many volumes, and it's really was a work of decades. So he wrote about this recently. He said that tikkun, think about when we say tikkun olam, what do you think is the meaning of tikkun? Just, you can unmute and say, what does tikkun mean to you?
Repair.
Right, repairing. So a lot of people will say, well, we had this tikkun was to repair something. But he says that actually tikkun may come from an expression in the Zohar. The Zohar is the great big book of Jewish mysticism, mystical stories, mystical interpretations of the Torah that go on, and they talk about the adventures of the companions, the beloved friends of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as they wandered around the Galilee, having all kinds of spiritual adventures. But it was probably written in medieval Spain, although talking about the Holy Land. And it says the word tikkuna actually means adornment. By studying Torah on the eve of Shavuot, we adorn the Shekhinah, the feminine divine presence, in preparation for her wedding the next day with her beloved Tiferet, the Holy One, blessed be He. So for the mystics, of course, Shavuot is kind of a wedding, and also even for regular rabbinic Judaism, because they saw, in a way, Mount Sinai is like this chuppah, and Moses is like the master of ceremonies, and the Torah is like our ketubah. And it was common to see this as kind of a wedding. Our covenant with God is like a wedding. So the Torah, if the Torah is the bride, we're kind of doing her makeup and doing her hair and everything by and giving her jewels by studying Torah. In two Zohar passages describing the tikkun, the course of study is not fixed according to any one particular scheme. Rather, the holy companions accompany the Shekhinah all night, delighting with her and her adornments in which she's arrayed, engaging in Torah, from Torah to prophets, prophets to writings, midrashic renderings of verses, and mysteries of wisdom. These are her tikkunim, her adornments, and her finery. But there is actually a book that has certain things that some people are very traditional Jews will not only study all kinds of material like we are right now, but they will read little selections from all, like, to give you a vast, quick kind of bird's eye view of Torah study. But in Judaism, there's always more than one answer. So who would like to give us a devar acher, another explanation? In this case, tikkun is a repair. So would anyone like to read this for us? Maybe someone who has not read something? Anybody?
Okay, I can.
Okay, Elsa, thank you.
Okay, another explanation is according to Midrashic tradition, Shir Hashirim Rabbah, the Israelites overslept on the morning of Revelation. Kabbalists in the 16th century Tzfa'at, such as the
Arizal, the holy,
Arizal,
yes, great Kabbalist, yes.
Instituted the custom of staying up all night studying as a spiritual repair, tikkun, and preparation to receive the Torah anew, and the arrival and popularity of coffee in 18th century Europe helped the custom spread.
Okay, so I actually found a great article written by a late Jewish historian about the role of coffee, that Jews love coffee, and coffee houses were places Jews like to hang out, and that, it's pretty hard to stay up all night unless you're someone like me who's like, insomniac and you like to be up in the middle of the night. But for a lot of people, it's hard, and if you drink coffee, it can help you stay up. So it's interesting that the popularization of this Kabbalistic, unusual Kabbalistic custom happened when coffee became available. So you have two explanations of tikkun. It's either adorning the Torah or the Shekhinah, the holy, divine, feminine, like a bride to marry the Holy One on Shavuot, or it's a repair for the fact that we overslept on the original day that we were going to receive the Torah. So from now we have to stay up all night. And then sometimes people will go home, have their dairy food, take a little nap, and then have their meat meal, because some people just eat meat. I don't know. Has anybody ever done the all-nighter, where you study Torah all night? Anybody here? No? I think I've done some like really late, and I think during the pandemic they had like a Zoom one, and I did quite a bit, but I don't know if I made it all night. That would be really bad. Sarah, yeah.
Jeffrey used to go to our old synagogue and take the boys, and they would take their sleeping bags. And when they got really tired, they would go in the lobby and sleep in their sleeping bags while the 5 or 6 people who actually managed to stay up all night and they did study groups. Well, but I just got a text from my son, my eldest son, who he and his wife are going to an all-night study group.
That's
great. And I just told him that we were doing a study group online for all the people who are over 65. I hope I haven't insulted anybody who's under 65.
Okay. Well, it's true. It is a lot. I think it's more popular with young people, and it's, in some places like in New York City or in Israel, it's a time to go out with other young people, learn Torah. Maybe you'll meet somebody, right? It's just similarly, other like the slichot, the songs that are sung in the middle of the night, like we do slichot, but Sephardic Jews do all these lively songs for several nights, and that's become like a big social. It's partly social and it's partly learning. Okay, I got a note there. Yeah, the barley. Well, okay. Also, the barley and the wheat harvest and the fruit is reflected in some Shavuot observances. I don't know if I lost the Hoffmans here. They asked the question. Oh, there you are. I see you. You're hiding in the corner of my screen. Yeah, certainly in Israel, on the kibbutzim, they try to kind of reenact some of the earlier practices of bringing the first fruits, even though there's no temple, but they would have sort of a pageant with them. Well, I'll show you a picture of that at the end. We overslept during the lightning and thunder over Mount Sinai that night. Amazing. Yeah, how can that be? Some people can sleep through anything. I don't know. Well, again, sometimes we make up the reasons after the fact. So then the last custom of Shavuot is decorating the synagogue and or your house with a lot of plants, trees, and there's all kinds of, again, no one's really sure why so many beautiful explanations were derived. But I've got one slide about that and an example. And we have some very pretty decorations up at the Seaside. Okay, so this was from Professor Rabbi Noah Golinkin, who is a leader of conservative Judaism in Israel. Famous, I think, for his ruling that Ashkenazic Jews can eat kitniot on Passover, at least in Israel, that they can eat beans and rice on it. But here he's talking about Shavuot and trying to figure out where all these different customs came from. And he gave about 8 answers. I just picked a few of them. So who would like to, let's see. Oh yeah, I got an example. Who would like to read this one? Anybody?
I will.
Okay, thanks, George.
I have to blow up my screen here a second.
Okay.
The Sinai bloomed, for there were grasses around Mount Sinai, as it is written, neither shall the flocks and the cattle graze opposite the mountain, that mountain. From this we learn that there was grazing.
Okay, I'll just stop for a moment that, and I put a picture as to, again, this is a photo, just a photo that I found, unknown author, but it's unknown photographer, but it's showing kind of the desert bloom. Sometimes there's a super bloom in the desert. So I always heard it explained like Mount Sinai had this kind of super bloom in honor of the receiving of the Torah, but I couldn't really find the source. This was the closest source I could find, is that, the Torah says there were flocks and cattle grazing, and so they must have been grazing on something, but that still doesn't give me all the reason for the beautiful flowers, right? So I think I always heard it was in Midrash Tanhuma, but I couldn't find it. But that, I'll just say an oral tradition, that the mountain blooms, so we decorate. Okay, continue if you want to continue.
It is customary to set up trees in the synagogue and in the homes. And it seems to me that the reason is that they should remind us that on Shavuot, we are judged by the fruit on the trees, and that the congregation should pray for them.
We're judged for the fruit. Yeah, so this is in the Mishnah that, even not only do people get judged on Rosh Hashanah, but different trees and fruits and plants and animals get judged. So we're saying a prayer for them, so we decorate with them. So that's interesting explanation. And here's another one that seems a little more, I think, realistic. George, number 3.
According to some, this custom is in memory of a custom described in the Mishnah. When the first fruits were brought up to Jerusalem, the horns of the oxen were adorned with olive wreaths, and the baskets of first fruits were also decorated.
So That's just, we were learning before with Larry, and that makes, that would be more of a recreation. And that became very popular in Israel with the children wearing wreaths. And I've done that at synagogues. If we had a lot of little kids running around, I love to give them little baskets of fruit decorated with flowers and let them wear little wreaths and then walk after the Torah and hold little Torahs. And that can be really pretty. We just have to find a way to get little, our kids to come there. And the last one.
Others say that these customs are in memory of the sweet-smelling air at the encampment at Mount Sinai described in the Mishnah.
In the Midrash, yeah.
In the Midrash.
And so that's a Midrash to the Song of Songs, this idea that it was also a sensory, a full sensory experience, because there was the lightning and the thunder and the synesthesia, and there was also a scent of flowers at the giving. I think that's kind of beautiful, right? But once again, to get, and I have a couple more just pictures to show you, but again, maybe it's not as romantic, but apparently maybe it is kind of a mystery of Shavuot that churches also had a Sunday at this time of year that they decorated with flowers and trees. And it became a question, were we doing a custom that we picked up from our neighbors, like having a Shavuot bush, instead of a Hanukkah bush? But over the years, it just became so ingrained that people thought of reasons, I guess, that it was kosher. And anyway, maybe the churches were just continuing an ancient pagan or pre-patriarchal, indigenous custom. It's the time of year that things are blooming, so decorate with blooms, right? So I think it's great. And I just love anything where you decorate with natural flowers and things. And I want to show you one spectacular synagogue this is in Rome, the great synagogue, all decorated with these, looks like peonies and roses, and it's just so lavish. And the roses themselves have a special place in Shavuot lore, because a rose is like Shoshana. Now, one explanation that I read is that we really accepted the Torah at Purim, when God was hidden and we were not under duress with God pressuring us to accept the Torah. Even the Midrash says, even ready to, kind of squish us under Mount Sinai if we didn't accept it. But in Shushan, with God's name not even mentioned, in Shushan, the setting for the story of Esther, we accepted the Torah fully, and so the Shoshana, the rose, becomes a symbol. That could be a possible symbol, and people even make paper cuts and decorations. That would be a craft for this day. And then again, in Israel, especially the kids on the kibbutz or in school, they've got their wheat and they've got their the crowns with flowers, and they've got the basket of the first fruits. And this is something we could do also in synagogues in the US. I mean, we did that at Temple Bethel, but I think we did it more in the fall when the children were starting school. I know I had a little basket like that when I was doing consecration. That was the beginning of studying, the beginning of our Jewish day. So that's what I have. I mean, there's other customs, there's liturgical customs and all, but I like those a lot. I like blintzes. I like learning Torah. I like flowers, right? And I like coffee, although maybe not afternoon, because decaf. Okay, we could have decaf. So any thoughts about any of all the things we've been learning? We're going to wrap up with the Kiddush, but I want to thank my co-teachers here. Thank you, George. Thank you, Larry, for doing this research and bringing some new information and new perspectives. And anybody have something you want to share about Shavuot, or a question that didn't get answered that you want to ask?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I don't remember much, and I think it's exactly what you said, because Hebrew school was over by the time Shavuot came. But I remember my mother always said that if it rained on Shavuot, it would rain for 40 days. And then later on, a few years later, maybe I was like 12 or 14 or 16, it was a particularly sunny day. It had rained on Shavuot, and it was a particularly sunny day. And I said, well, see, it's not true. And she said, well, but it might rain like for 5 minutes. So where did that come from? Now she would have been 100 next year. So,
oh, wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you know that I had never heard that one, but it might come from the story of when the Israelites demanded a king. And Samuel, the prophet, was leading, and he said, I'm sorry, I'd have to look it up in the Bible, but he's like, fine, you can have a king, but something's gonna happen now, very out of season. It's time for, I think it was the wheat harvest, and there was a storm that threatened the crops, and that was seen as a warning. So maybe that just became like a, folklore that got passed along. So I'd have to look it up, but that's kind of fascinating. Always learning some little bit of lore. Anybody? Marjorie, did you want to ask something or say something?
I just remember teaching it to preschoolers and having them reflect upon rules that they should have in school, they should have home, and then doing a climb, creating a hike and a climb for them to experience, something higher like Mount Sinai.
Okay.
And
well, now that,
yes. And of course, making food with dairy and plants, that's the way
so you got the customs of the staying up all night, but maybe you skip nap time that day.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
But well, PJ Library has a book about it. It's kind of like your school when the kids are going to go on a little climb up a hill, and one of the children is very nervous about it, but she does it. Okay, well, I hope people at least got inspired. Does anyone feel like after tonight you're a little interested in trying something for Shavuot?
Yes, yes.
Okay, tomorrow we're gonna do it. So we're gonna we're having a service. We're doing the 10 Commandments. We're gonna hear from the book of Ezekiel. We're gonna have the decorations and the blitzes and also of course, there's other liturgical things we do. There's Yizkur, there's Hallel, memorial prayers and prayers of praise, and there are in traditional synagogues even longer special poems like we're not doing Akdamut, but you could read the book of Ruth and study. And I thought we could conclude with the Kiddush for Shavuot. And if you have this, if you do have a copy of Mishkan Tefillah, it's on page 386, but I'm going to just read it from here. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'romanu mikol lashon v'kiddashanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai lanu b'ava moadim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sason et yom chag hashuvot hazeh Zman Matan Toratenu. We give gratitude for Hag HaShavuot, the time of the giving of Torah. Mikra Kodesh Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. It is a holy day, remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. Kivanu v'chato v'tanu kidashnu mikol ha'amim u'modei kodshecha b'simcha v'sasoni chatanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim.
Amen.
And again, I have Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh l'chaim.
Chaim.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, George. Thank you, Larry.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Chag Sameach, everybody.
Chag Sameach.
Thanks, Maya.
Good Yontif.
So, Rabbi, when do